Ag the Eve agus Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. It is John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and we are here with our weekly check-in, coffee talk, and chat. Although I will confess, it's tea there today. I did a video not so long ago about inviting the good neighbors in. Someone was wondering about what's the protocol on having them into their house, and just to, spoiler alert, don't. All of the Irish folklore are about not having them in your house. But there was a comment on that which was about ancestors. And what about inviting ancestors in? So I thought I'd answer to that and speak a little bit to that today. But before I do that, I'd like to invite you to pop on down in the description, grab on that link that we have there, and join our mailing list. What it also does is it gets you a free download of a really good list of resources, or a really good list of good resources, or a list of really good resources that we recommend at the Irish Pagan School for exploring your spirituality and your path and your growth. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of old information, appropriated information out there. Just we've had to struggle through a heck of a lot. So being able to point at, these are the things you really want to be looking at in your pursuit of Irish paganism, it is a value. So that's what we have that there. And the rest of the value really is you're on the mailing list. You get emails from us a couple of times a week letting you know what's going on, what kind of upcoming classes we have at the school, or, social hangouts that we do, anything like that at all. So please do join us on the mailing list. But to get back to that question, very interesting question. What's the protocol on inviting ancestors into your home? And it's a very interesting one from an Irish perspective, and it's actually quite topical for where we are in the season. As I'm recording this, we are approaching Samhain, which is the end of October, start of November, and that is the end of the pagan year, if you couldn't tell by the pumpkin piñata behind me. But Samhain is an interesting, fascinating time in Ireland because as much as we talk about a large amount of traditions surrounding the other crowd, surrounding the good neighbors, the fae folk, the she, and how it's offering a portion of the abundance that we have received to them as is their due, and also defending our children from being taken by them. By the way, folks, just to the modern tradition of Halloween, dressing your kids up as monsters, comes from Samhain. And it was a belief that if your child was dressed to look like an otherworldly creature or a monster of some shape or form, then it was less likely to be taken by creatures of the other world. And so that's where that tradition comes from. It wasn't about going around and mugging kids for candy, or like trick or treating or egging people's houses or toilet paper in trees or anything like that at all. Also, don't do that to trees. I love trees. Okay, maybe toilet paper is biodegradable, but still. It's important to know where these things come from, and the intention was that you would actually dress your children up to save them, to protect them from being taken, because at Samhain things are said to be closer than they normally are at other times of year. People use this kind of thinning of the veil term, but that is a slightly more modern term to try and get an understanding of it. Like, the other world is very close in Ireland and in Irish traditions and Irish culture. There might be just places you could literally step on the wrong piece of sod. You could actually turn down the wrong lane. You could step into a ring. You could touch the wrong tree, and suddenly you're in the other world. So a lot of our mythology and a lot of folklore talk about how to extract yourself, how to get away from those dangerous circumstances, and how to kind of to balance that out. Again, there's good and bad. We have an amazing teacher at the Irish Pagan School, Morgan Daimler. They've written loads of books about this, and they've taught a couple of classes with us. We're honored to have them there. Lora has also written books about, the fairy faith in Ireland, the other crowd. There's a lot that can be learned, but I'm getting off track, so I need to get myself back into ancestors and Samhain, because ancestor belief does exist in Ireland. Now, I know there are many other cultures around the world which have, very specific days or very specific practices about summoning back ancestors or making space for ancestors, but a lot of them tend to revolve around food and, honoring them, remembering them, making space for them to return into our lives. And there is a tradition of that in Ireland as well. It's called the Dumb Supper. And so it would be done at Samhain, and it was essentially setting an extra table, an extra seat at the table with like all the dishes, sometimes maybe the good dishes, and dishing up a portion for any ancestor who would want to come and sit. Now, there are a number of different ways that this tradition would be practiced. In some traditions say that you have to prepare the entire meal in silence as a way of making like the place ready and like clearing space, like remembering silently remembering the departed and the ancestors. Others were that the meal had to be consumed in silence. So like everyone would sit around the table and like no there would be no noise as people would eat their dinner. And then that the meal would remain there until the next day. And that's when, to make space for the ancestor to have come and to have been seated. Um, the idea of having my family sit around the table and get 5 minutes of silence, you'd be lucky. You really would. And it really does come down to the type and the connection and the relationship with the ancestor. Like if it was my mammy's mammy, absolutely, it would be raucous, laughing and joking. She would be the one to tell some of the worst jokes. I absolutely loved Katie Daly for that. If it was my Nana Mary, things might be a little bit more reserved, my dad's mammy. But like she was always one for the laugh and all of them one for the time. So it is about knowing the person that you're inviting to dinner. And that is what it is. It's about making space for that connection of ancestry within it. Now, there's a lot of nearly every Irish home will have some photograph gallery up of, well, here's like, my dad, here's my granddad, here's my granny, here's the grandkids, here's the cousins. Invariably, like my mom actually has a wall dedicated to it. She calls it the shooting gallery because it's like there's there. You walk in, you get the stories. But like it's those who are gone beyond the life are not lost to us as long as they're remembered. And one of the amazing things that we know about Irish kind of mythology, and even down to actually, here's a lovely fact that I enjoy, and it still tickles my brain. There are four story cycles in Irish kind of academia or Irish lore. And there's the mythological cycle dealing with the Tuatha Dé Danann, the arrival of people into Ireland, dealing with all of that kind of stuff, the gods. There's the Ulster cycle, surrounding all of the Tombo Coolia, Tombo Bagavnia, all that kind of stuff, and the warrior culture at that point. Then there's the Fenian cycle, which is all the stories around the Book of Leinster, around like Fionn McCool, etc. But that fourth cycle is the cycle of kings, and the cycle of kings pretty much is a glossary or a list of lineage, and this is where we've moved from the mythological to the pretty much historical, as we have records of all of these individuals kind of being documented as kings in Ireland. But it's not just that they're a king in Ireland, it's also what they were notable for, what they were famous for. And we know from all of the legal circumstances, the Brehon laws in Ireland, no one got to have a say in any kind of gathering of nobles or kings unless their lineage was listed out beforehand. And your lineage wasn't just, yeah, hi, I'm John, son of Jack of Carmel. It was, hi, I'm John, son of Jack and Carmel, Jack, son of Ned and Mary, Carmel, like daughter of Tom and Katie. And then you'd have to go back to like your most ancient famous ancestors to say, this is my right to speak here in this land because I am of this land, I'm of this tribe, I'm of this Tuath. So the recognition of our ancestry is not it's practiced differently here as to what I've seen in some other cultures. Because it's about, and I touched on this in other videos as well, it's about who are you? Who are you and where do you come from? And that's not a case of like, who are you? And like, get the fuck out or anything like that. It's not from a racist point of view. But unfortunately, some people do use it that way. It's like, oh yeah, you don't look like you're from Ireland. Go the fuck home. I have no time for that. Racism is racism, and it just shows ignorance and fear. Um, But you will find, like, in Ireland, people will ask, "Oh yeah, who are you then?" Or like, so where are you from yourself? And that's trying to understand, like, what people are you from? Like, what locality did you grow up in? Like, do I know anyone in that area? And it's those, like, we joke about this 7 degrees of separation between any two people on the planet. Any two people in Ireland, it's probably like three or four. Like, you'll find, oh yeah, sure, I was up. I'm not sure I know blah 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 somewhere down this location, or I know someone in Dublin who grew up around the road from you. So I've had that happen multiple times, and it's joyful. But as far as ancestors, ancestors definitely have a place in Ireland and in Irish practices and Irish homes. Um, Ancestor worship is a little bit complex because ancestor worship can cross the line into, let's be honest, Ireland was very much colonized by the Catholic Church. And so, you should believe in God, you should believe in the angels, you're allowed to believe in the saints, you know. But I light a candle for my granny, but you light that in the church for Mary, and like, it's Mary who look after your granny. Like, so there's a lot of tradition there that's put itself in between like the direct relationship that we would have with our ancestors and our spirituality. You need to, like, pray to Mary to intercede on your behalf with your granny. Um Whereas for me and for my relationship with both my grannies, I would have no problem just talking to them directly whenever I need to. Um, and that's one thing that, I have found in my pagan path, that like I don't need someone to come between me and my gods. I don't need someone to come between me and my ancestors, because I am part of them. They are part of me. I exist because they loved and lived and kind of passed on their knowledge and information down to myself. So, remembering those names and honoring them is living the best life I can in some ways. Um, but it's not very far. There's lots of graveyards around Ireland as well. And there was another interesting question about, like, graveyard practices. Like the very famous one being the wake. When someone actually passes, and not many places actually do it much these days, but there's the viewing really, and where a body is kind of taken and prepared, and then it's left to sit. And most times that's done in funeral homes these days, but there are still some places where the person would be laid out at home. And then the wake would happen. And a wake was the doors would be opened, and anyone in the community in the local area would come in, and it was their time to sit with the dead and to acknowledge their passing and to like remember with them. But it wasn't like always a solemn affair either. There would be another room where someone would be playing some music, and someone would be like, passing around some food and drink, and there would be like a bit of a party to reminisce about, like, the life that that individual had lived, and how amazing it was and how great it was. Um, and so that's the tradition of the Irish wake. There were many kind of death traditions around, well, okay, I don't want to spin us off into like um full on kind of like death traditions in Ireland. I may actually end up teaching a class on this soon enough. But as far as ancestors go, inviting them into your house is safe, because we are descended of them. They are of our lineage. Um, but again, though, there needs to be health and safety considered. Like, um, and that's why times like Samhain, preparing a dumb supper, it creates a space for the interaction. It creates a space for to honor that. And much like any kind of ritual practice, it needs to have a preparation. It needs to have a space to be held for it to work. But then it does need to be closed, and it does need to be let go, because those who are dead and beyond are beyond for a reason. They don't need to be brought back and kept here. And so, like, clearing away the dump supper the next morning is kind of showing them gratitude, saying thank you very much, and allowing them to go carry on back to their own journey. Um, the other thing I would say is that the Irish tradition does include, Irish paganism, sorry, does include transmigration of spirit. In that, like, the your energy or your spirit that's incorporeally manifest in your physical form isn't destroyed when you die. It changes, and it can come back in different ways. And also there's lots of lovely kind of mentions of, say, bees or robins or birds as kind of messengers of those who have passed on, like coming to kind of share. When my granddad Tom died, a robin kind of kept coming to my granny Katie's garden. And now, since she has passed, anytime I see a robin, it reminds me of that, and it reminds me of her. Although I have actually had robins literally kind of come to the doorstep here in the house. I was in the car, I pulled into the driveway, I hadn't gotten out of the car, and I saw a robin fly down and land on the doorstep and knock on the door. And I was like, what? This is weird. And then I realized the robin was like kind of pecking at some bugs that were on the door. But like, I then tried to take a photograph of it, and the robin stopped because it saw my movement. And instead of flittering away, it just stood and looked at me for a minute. And that's when I had the memory come back of like, well, Katie said that Tom would always come back. And I wondered if that was kind of Katie sending me a message that she was coming back, and just knock it. Just let her know I'm all right. Um, so yeah, as far as kind of ancestor spaces, if you are going to engage in ancestor worship, do it within a controlled environment. Like same kind of ritual protocols apply. Create a space for it, make an altar space, make offerings if you're choosing to make offerings, if you want to engage with your personal ancestry. And the dump supper is an easy way to do that at a very particular time that it suits that. Um, and one thing I would say though is engaging with your ancestry can be challenging, because I talk very fondly about Nana Mary and Katie. I'm fond of Tom, but my dad's dad Ned wasn't the greatest. He had a lot of PTSD from being in the army, being in the wars in 1916, and he didn't deal with it well. He was one for the drink in all of the bad Irish stereotypes. And so, yeah, like, but he's still my ancestor. That's still part of me. That's still part of my lineage. That's still part of what I am. And as much as we like would love to be able to, oh well, I'm going to set this out and I'm going to invite in my favorite granny and all the rest of it. We need to make space for the other aspects of the story that make up who we are. It's the same as doing shadow work. It's the same as kind of approaching any form of growing in our spirituality. We need to be open to the broader narratives of it all, and be brave enough to face what we need to face. So with that, I will say Gaurav Milamakas, thank you very much for sharing with us today, for joining us for today's chat. I will say again, don't forget to pop down, click on the link, join the mailing list, get that free resource. And again, you'll get a couple of emails from us a week letting you know what's going on and reminding you when these free resources are coming out. Until next time, look after yourself and slán.